I'm gonna go ahead and be honest with you. I can't do this game justice. I lack the capacity. I lack the time. Because in order to discuss the making of this game, I would have to discuss the making of the N64, which would involve discussing the making of the PlayStation, and everything that was connected there too. The wonderful, incredible Nintendo PlayStation, which existed for, I think, about 3 days total before someone, not gonna name names, but it's a certain idiot who was working at Nintendo, who was eventually replaced with Iwata, decided, let's go with Philips instead. That sounds like a winning move. You ever wonder about, like, those kind of what-ifs in history? I mean, I'm sure most people do, but this is a big one when it comes to gaming. If that moron hadn't decided to pull the plug on that deal, especially at the last minute and in such a vitriolic way, and had decided to go with Sony and produce the Nintendo PlayStation with Sony instead of this Philips CDI, what would that have done for gaming? How would that have shifted things? I mean, the broad sweeping strokes of gaming probably wouldn't have changed too much, but it is interesting to think about, especially as I look at my PlayStation 4 over there. Or my PlayStation 1 right there. Either way, they made the N64 instead. As a direct consequence, the Sony PlayStation came out well before the N64. Remember that little issue we had with the Genesis and the SNES? Same problem, except worse in every way. And the PlayStation was not doing super well, but it was doing pretty damned well. It was not moving like, at the time, it wasn't moving like SNES numbers. But it was still moving numbers, and plenty of people at Nintendo were worried about it. We need to get our console, our competition out there as quickly as possible. Now, what's interesting is this led to a problem. And I'm mentioning this here specifically because this is the last game we're covering that Miyamoto was the primary mainliner on. He was listed as director, of course, but you know what I mean. This was the last game that he threw 100% of himself into, that he was there every day, at every stage, and every level of game development. And he's still involved with game development, to probably literally this day. But he didn't do this ever again. And one of the reasons why is because of stress. Let's look at this in the proper lens, shall we? Alright, Miyamoto has plenty of clout and plenty of weight in the office. No problem. He said, we're not launching the N64 or Mario 64 early. I want more time. And multiple people said, okay. And so whenever anything was brought up by any executive or any money person, as I like to call them, any time they were having issues with the quarterly report, any time they pointed out how well the Sony PlayStation was doing, the people would always just point to him. And Miyamoto had to deal with that extra little non-tangible weight while he was working on this game. And he still had to push the release date back of the game specifically. He wanted 2 more months, is one of the things he wrote right at the end. And he had to fight for that too. He got it, of course he did. But I want you to imagine that weight. That's the wrong word. I use weight a lot when it comes to game development, and it means something else. Imagine the pressure. Imagine the stress. Imagine having that on your back while you're trying to develop something that has kind of never been done before. Oh, sure, 3D gaming was a thing. Remember, three-dimensional graphics in general were a thing since the late 80s. Actually, or well before that, if we want to really go back with that. So let's not do that. Let's not really dive down the hole. The point is, the idea of 3D gaming was not new. But this, a full 3D platformer in a full 3D space with the Nintendo weight behind it, with the Mario brand on it, this was a sea change, like I referenced earlier. And a lot of work and effort was put into it, and it shows. And it was also let's be honest with ourselves, it was effectively the first of its kind. And people would spend about a decade trying to either catch up to it, emulate it, or emulate it extremely badly, depending on the specific game we're talking about. Now, I cannot overstate how important this game is to gaming development as a concept. I can't. Because of the fact that this is the one that really pushed into that 3D space. Now, I know there were 3D platformers before this, and I know there are better 3D platformers than this, even on this very system. I myself think Banjo-Tooie is actually a superior game to this one. But think about all of the games that have used this as their initial brick. This is the thing that they have been building on top of. In short, what I'm trying to say is that in many ways, this is the Quake of the console market. And if you're wondering why Quake specifically, well, hopefully someday we'll be able to cover that so I can go into that into more detail. This wasn't the Doom. That was before this. Doom predates this by quite a bit, actually. But you get my point. So, I just kind of gave away my opinion, and I probably should have opened with that. I don't think Mario 64 has actually aged all that well. Now, this is... So there's the bombshell to make people leave the thing. I have to admit, if I had been asked to do a video or a stream of Mario 64 just 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I would have been a lot less confident in my own opinion and my ability to express that opinion. To say that, I would be scared to. I mean, I am still scared to, but that scaredness would prevent me from doing so. I would allow that fear to prevent me from stating that opinion on the internet. And nowadays, I feel a little bit more confident in being able to look at this in game and saying, this is a significant, important, innovative, very significant game for gaming history, but I don't think it's aged that well. You can always tell, I think, when it comes to analyses, what part of the game the people really spent their time on. The developers, right? The parts of the game that really have the polish above and beyond others. And I always find it's best to do that direct contrast things. If you see the things in immediate contrast, the differences become substantially more apparent, and we can appreciate, or unappreciate, the two sides of things substantially more. I want to talk about Rainbow Ride and Bob-omb Battlefield. Now, I don't think Bob-omb Battlefield is the best stage in this game. I don't. I have other stages that I'd love to talk about that I think are superior. But Bob-omb Battlefield is obviously a stage that has had a huge amount of time and effort and work put into polishing it to a shine. People, far smarter people than I, have done analyses on the music for it, on the layout, on the placement, on the warps. Here's the things I want to add to the conversation, because I've never heard anyone talk about this. First of all, Bob-omb Battlefield is what we call a safe level. What I mean by that is there's effectively no instant deaths. Compare and contrast even just the next stage, the Thwomp Fortress. Thwomp Fortress is an instant death stage, bottomless pits. And then we have the Chilly Mountain, bottomless pit. And actually a lot of stages in this game have bottomless pits. Bob-omb Battlefield very technically does, but for all intents and purposes does not. It is a stage where you can move around and maneuver and jump and platform, but if you fall, it's not the end of the world. And it's almost designed to be a playground, I think is the word I want to use for that. It really wants you to think about how to maneuver through it and all the different things you can do. And as is per usual for the Mario standard, the first stage is tutorialized to hell and back, both with the actual text in the terms of the text things, the people you can talk to, but also just in the stage design itself. Here's the other thing that I don't hear a lot of people talk about. And I'll talk about the instant deathing more because I got to expound upon that. But let's talk about the first thing you see. In 2D platformers, the developer always has tools in their disposal to encourage the player to do certain types of actions, either because they want to trick them or because they want to tutorialize through action, which is something that is very common in the Mario series. As I gushed about excessively, Super Mario World and Mario 3 and Mario 2 and Mario 1 all tell you everything you need to know without ever needing to touch a manual. Even if you can't speak the language of the game, you understand just by how the design of the level is what to do and how to do it. And it's brilliant, and I love it. Mario 64 can't quite do that. The camera is in the player's control. You don't have a set screen or a set movement to the screen. The player can move wherever they want to, and the camera can go wherever they want to. They can't guide the experience in this normal way. So what do? I want you to do me a favor. For those of you who've played this game, remember whatever stages you remember the most, and remember when you first enter the portrait. It goes whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. We've got the name of the stage there, which, by the way, is the same thing we gave a positive to the galaxies for. It's a hint on where the star is. That's good to begin with, so it's already something that's indicating. But that requires text, and that requires language. No, the thing that they do that's so brilliant, and is the Mario standard, is the first thing you see and how you see it. And it varies from stage to stage. In Dire Docks, you spin in the air a few times and fall down and then into the water. From that one action, we know exactly what this stage is. This is the underwater stage. Similarly, in the previous thing, I forget the name of it, it's the water stage that's before that. I don't remember all the stage names, forgive me. What's the first thing we see? There's a empty terrain, and there's just water right in front of us. If we happen to explore in the area around us, we find nothing. We are encouraged to go into the water. What do we see in Thwomp's Fortress? The camera starts up here, we're up here, and we see the fortress, we see the tower, and then we come down to here, and we see there's a big wall, which is now covering the entirety of the screen. And now all we have is the way to go up, because Thwomp's Fortress is all about going up in its movement. What do we see when we go to the Chilly Mountain stage? We start up, we plummet down, and the first thing that we see is a tree, which has a red coin, and the cottage, which has coins leading into an obvious entryway on the top. And what is the Chilly Mountain all about but going down? There are four separate stars in the Chilly Mountain that are all about going down the mountain. And of course, what do we have with Bob-omb Battlefield, going back to the one I started with? We start off with a view that encapsulates like 70% of the entire stage. We can see almost everything from this angle. We can see the eventual spot where we're going to be going to. We can see the beginnings of the floating island, so we know there's a floating island to get up to over there. We see enemies. We see platforms. We see the chomp. We see everything we need to know at that initial moment at the beginning of the stage. And almost every stage in this game designs itself around that initial moment to do that kind of indicate, and I love it. Now, you heard me mention almost. There are some exceptions. The first is the Hazy Maze Cave. Now, by memory, I remember Hazy Maze pretty badly. What's the first thing we see in Hazy Maze? I'm just going to tell you. It's a map. First thing we see is just this map. Not a great sign. The second thing we see in the Hazy Maze Cave is boring textures and a single enemy who can't even reach us. And Hazy Maze sucks. And you're probably thinking, Laura, why does it suck? Your big thing is telling us why. Well, I could talk about the platform and how it's terrible and how janky it is. I could talk about how many issues I have with the instant death pits. But let's be honest with ourselves. The big problem with the Hazy Maze Cave is that the corridors are really small and the game doesn't accommodate that. Notice those are two separate points, by the way. A game having small, tight corridors is not actually a problem if you build around it. I can prove this because this game does that. Think about the Boo Mansion for a second, the Boo House. Think about how small that level is. It's minuscule, relatively speaking. In fact, I think it's actually the smallest stage in the game. It's either that or the Cove is the smallest stage. They're very tiny stages. But that's okay, because what they did with that was they thought about it. And what we have is effectively a Resident Evil camera kind of situation, where the camera is just affixed to a point, usually a corner, so we can get a nice view of the whole room we're about to be in. When we go through a door, camera's now over here. It also adds to something I'm very big on when it comes to navigation in any video game, and that's visual continuity. Something that helps you to keep anchored, either because there's like in Subnautica, you can always see where the ship is just about anywhere above the water, or in, I'm trying to think, like in Mega Man games, you can, that's a bad example. Of course, I can't think of any other examples off the top of my head because I'm a moron, but the point is that visual continuity is when you can tell where you are in relation to where you've been and in relation to where you're going. It's something that encourages you to have a mental map and an understanding of your location, and thus help you to navigate the game, right? Note that maps can be a cheating way to accomplish this, but that's not the same thing. A game with a good map is nice, but a game with good visual continuity is better, and a game with both is the best. The Boo House has wonderful visual continuity. At no point am I lost in there. At every point in time, because of how they show the entrance of the thing, and then we're over here, and then we go back through here, and then we'll go over here. The way that they do those camera hops and the way that they do the navigation through the doors means I'm never lost in that stage. Now compare and contrast that to the Hazy Maze Cave. Now it's not, I don't want to say I ever get lost in there per se, but there's no real sensation of where I am in relation to where I've been, especially because the camera is just the normal camera. No work or effort was put into trying to place it somewhere or do something with it to make it navigate those tiny little corridors you're going through. They're not even that small, relatively speaking, but they're small enough, especially since, and this is the other problem, it gets in the way of the camera control. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment. What happens 99.9% of the time when I do these reviews is my opinion on the game changes. With analysis mode, with decades of experience, I look at a thing, I guess I should say decade of experience. Years of experience, I'm able to look at a thing and say, okay, this and this and this and that and that and that. And sometimes my opinion goes up and down and both and neither in all directions. It is extremely rare my opinion doesn't really change walking into a game. This was this one. I expected this to score decently, but not that highly. I expected to have issues with the controls, but not that many issues. I expected to have severe issues with the camera, and I did. I expected the game to be mostly enjoyable, except when it was extremely aggravating, and that's exactly what happened. The camera in this game isn't the worst camera I've ever seen. We were able to come up with several worse cameras, but to call this camera good is not something I have it in me to do, because I'm not a very good liar. This camera, again, it's new. It's understandable why. That doesn't mitigate the fact that it is aggravating to try and navigate. Most of the time, I don't even try to control the camera. You know, the Uncharted method, as has put it out. Instead, I just kind of let the camera do its own thing and hope for the best. There's issues with that, of course, because the camera has a tendency to try and follow you, but it's easy for it to get confused. And what is very common is, okay, I'm here, and I've got a very difficult platform to go on, and the camera's like this. Okay, that's not good. And the Hazy Maze Cave is a perfect example of that. But the other problem with the camera is the camera control, if you could call it that, so you can kind of rotate it around and try to move it into position so you could see better. But the camera will not, well, or at least does not like to move around when it comes to there's an object. So if the camera's right here, and there's a wall right here, it's going to go bonk, bonk, and just say no. And again, that brings me back to the Hazy Maze Cave. But I keep talking about the Hazy Maze Cave, and I don't want to be completely negative. So let's go ahead and talk about some positivity here. I already mentioned the Boo House, which is awesome. Let's talk about how Shifty Sandland is the worst level in the game. No, I'm kidding. Sorry. Shifty Sandland is not what I would consider to be a good level. Now, I'm going to stop there, because the only reason I'm even bringing it up is to compare and contrast Lethal Lava Land. These two lands are actually fairly similar to each other. Both are relatively flat, both are relatively small. Both have a second extra area you can enter into, which actually checkpoints you when you enter into it. And both rely on different modes of transport. In fact, both have shells. And I guess that's it, actually. Is there a cap in Lethal Lava Land? I don't actually know. But either way, both levels, you can see how they were kind of developed alongside each other. They also have the same song. A very similar song, actually, to each other. Cool. Okay. I love Lethal Lava Land. It's one of my favorite stages in the game. And it's because so much of what that stage is put onto you, the player. So lava doesn't actually instant kill you in this game. Instead, it makes you go, ha 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 ha. Except Charles Martinet does it much better than I could ever possibly do it. By the way, first time we were hearing Mario. Not the first game he's ever voiced. It's actually the second game. And he was voicing Mario since the 90s in trade shows. But that's neither here nor there. Again, the behind the scenes would take a while to go into. Although, did you know that Leslie Swan, who was the senior editor at Nintendo Power at the time, actually voices Peach? And in fact, this was the first time we ever found out that Peach was her name, which confused the hell out of me when I was playing this. Granted, I was a teenager at that point, but she's just like, Princess Toadstool. Peach, and I thought that was just like a peace, or, see you around, or you're cool, or just some kind of outro, some kind of salutation. It didn't even occur to me that it was her name. Anyways, all of that's on you, so you can recover from the lava. In fact, you have 2 hops to be able to recover. Unless you get coins along the way, then you can recover even further. Also, the lava, the platforms are spaced in a way so that in very few places do you not have some way in which you can get back to safety, get back to ground. Now, there are locations where you can't, but they're pretty few and far between. There's the aforementioned shell, and the fact that a huge amount of this level is designed around the shell with the slants and the slopes in order to be able to allow you to surf around and just have fun with it. That's all awesome. I don't have anything else to add to that. It's just awesome. Now let's look at Shifting Sandland really quick. Now, I'm just going to stay here very briefly, because this place has a similar partial gimmick as the quicksand. Then it has the instant death quicksand, which the moment you touch it, you're dead. It is effectively Spikes. Bob has returned in the form of Sandman, and he has decided to go ahead and have his revenge upon the sand that actually left with his wife. Look, his wife sleeps around a lot, okay? So, this sand problem, no judgment, this sand problem, it's instant death. That's an issue. The moment your toe touches it, you're gone. Now, that's the first and most obvious problem. And again, this game has a little bit of an instant death problem, as I've mentioned before. But this is even worse because there's lots of weird geometry in the level. So instead of the smooth sloping thing we have going on in Lethal Lava Land, we have weird bumps that you can't even see unless you know they're there, which instantly kill your your shell, which causes you to instantly die on the sand. There's also those damned pillars, which of course you can walk on except when you can't because physics. So between the wonky physics and the instant death pits and the geometry of the land, it's clear that it's just not quite as well designed as Lethal Lava Land. Then we move forward a little bit. I'm kind of skipping over several of these for obvious reasons. We've got Big, Tiny Huge Island, which by memory was my favorite island. It turned out to be like my fourth favorite, but it's still a good island. It's still fun. It's gimmicky, it's interesting. Getting 100 coins on it, sucks. And I suppose that's a good segue, isn't it? I never realized until this exact playthrough how much I hate 100%ing Mario 64. I've done it twice before, once on the N64, once on the DS version. I was going for a 100% playthrough this time. The reason we stopped, and we were 4 stars from the end, the reason we stopped was I realized that it was actually an inefficient use of my time when I've got theater work I could be doing. So I finally decided, you know what, this is stupid, moving on. But the 100 stars are pretty much the reason for that. I call it the 100 stars because it's the stars that you get 100 to do. I kept doing that on camera too, and people kept thinking, you can get 100 stars? No, what I mean is the 100 coin stars. I never realized how aggravating it was to me and how frustrating and how stupid it was and why it's pushed me away from doing this. How many of you, when you replay various Mario games, you 100% it just normally? How many of you get 96 exits on a normal playthrough of Mario World? How many of you play all the levels in Mario Bros. 3 when you go through them? How many of you skip the warps in 1 or 2? How many of you like to go get everything except for the blue coins in Sunshine? Or how many of you like to get all the stars in Galaxy? It's a fairly normal thing. It's a fairly common thing. However optional it may or may not be, it is content, and content that is usually fun. I would have no problem 100%ing this game if the 100 coin stars were redesigned. Because there's several problems with it. Now, let's be very clear about this, and I had to reiterate this on stream several times. Difficulty or ease has nothing to do with this. Problem number 1, pacing. Going through and getting the coins on each level slows the game down to a crawl. Even if you know the stage reasonably well, what you're doing at all points is thinking about what to get and where and why, which could be an engaging activity, except you're also kind of stressed the entire time, because you know that any time you die, you lose all your progress. Problem number 2, absolutely no checkpointing. Which leads me, of course, to problem number 3. It's kind of padding. Now, what I mean by that is getting the full 100 coins usually just kind of stretches out the duration and playstyle a little bit too much. Again, even if you know what you're going and you know what you're doing, you're not a speedrunner or a tasser, then it still takes quite a while to get the 100 coins in any given stage. This goes all the way back to the beginning and all the way to the end. Now, we thought of a few ways to fix this. The cheap and easy solution, the thing that would take 5 seconds to implement, make each stage require 50 coins instead of 100. Simply by chopping that in half, many of those problems go away. You don't lose as much progress when you die. You still lose progress, so that's problematic, but you don't lose as much progress when you die. It doesn't take as long, and it doesn't slow the game down to a crawl. All 3 problems fixed. But that's the cheap solution. Several people came up with other solutions, but the one that stuck with me the most is, why don't we Banjo-Tooie this? Why don't we make it so that each coin has permanence? Now, from what I understand, the N64 did have the hardware capacity to do this, so there's no hardware excuses here. What I mean by that is, let's say you're going through a stage and you collect a coin, and it's collected. That coin is now permanently collected. So, on any given star, as you're just navigating through the stage, you're grabbing the coins as you go. And if you ever end up with the total of 100, after all your various playthroughs, after your 6 stars as you're going through, then you get the 100 coin star. The more I thought about this, the more I fell in love with this idea, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. As a game analyst who would love to design games someday, from a game design perspective, I love this concept because it does so much in place of a total absence of what is there right now. First of all, it can be used as a navigation thing. You ever see a place that has coins? You haven't been there yet. So you can know, okay, well, I need to check that area, and I need to check that area, and I need to check that area, either for secrets or for stars or for whatever. Second thing, it allows you to save your progress. So if you just want to go through and get the 100 coins, you can. If you die after getting coin 94, this actually happened to me on camera, then when you go back to the stage, you still have 94 coins. You just have to get those last ones that you were missing. Next point, because of the nature of this permanence, it also allows you to do it without doing it in one go. Like I was hinting at earlier, you could just kind of get all the coins on the way to the first star and then get all the coins on the way to the second star. It kind of encourages you to pick them up as you're going, kind of makes them a little more of a collectible rather than making them a punishment. Now, there's a flaw with this. Coins are used to regain health, and so the health system would have to be reworked in one way or another to really accommodate this. Now, there's several ways we could do this. We could have there be a regenerating health thing. We could change the damage values. We could make other ways to heal. But once again, to give the easiest, simplest 5-second solution, make it so that the coins, once collected, are still there. Nice and transparent, so you can tell that's one you've already picked up. In other words, you can still go grab a coin you've already collected, and it heals you. It just doesn't add to the collection because you've already gotten that one. It would even add a further category and purpose in 100%ing this game, getting all the coins in a given stage. And given the fact that it keeps track of things like enemy coins, and we know this because if you kill an enemy and get its coins and leave and go back, the enemy respawns, it doesn't drop any coins because you've gotten them already. So we know it keeps track of this stuff. That would lead to another thing too. It's such a great idea. I'm sorry. I think that would add a great deal and make the game substantially more fun to 100%. Which is a damn shame. It is worth noting, in the game's favor, that you don't have to 100% on any sense of the word. This is not Mario Sunshine, which we'll be covering tomorrow. This is a game in which you need 70 out of 120 stars. And the way this branches up and opens up is magnificent, because you need 1 star to be able to progress. And then you need 3. And then you need 8. And then you need 30, and so forth and so on. I forget the actual numbers, but you get the point. As you're progressing, the number of stars you have access to explodes. And you can just pick and choose. I don't like this stage. You can skip it entirely. I don't like this particular star. You can try for another one. And so many of these options exist in order to allow you to carve your path through the game. That being said, I'm not sure I think this game is particularly replayable. Obviously it has mechanics in favor of replay, but what I mean by that is, and this is just my personal opinion, I feel too frustrated playing this game to really replay it all that often. It's why I haven't played the original N64 version since 1998. This was effectively my third playthrough of several of these stages. Now, I used to replay the game semi-frequently, but I'd skip certain stages. Rainbow Ride and Shifting Sandlands and the Hazy Maze Cave. I just skip them because I don't need them, like I just alluded to, right? But I feel like if I didn't feel so frustrated the whole time, I could get forward through it and replay it more often. Now, again, why? Why am I so frustrated? I've already elucidated on the camera. I think I've made that point clear. But I didn't really talk about the controls all that much. There are several problems I have with the controls. The easiest way to explain it in one sentence is to say that I feel like I'm never in control of Mario. I always feel like I'm trying to kind of guide him in a direction, and he's fighting me the entire time. So I never feel in control of the character. Now, this is related to the squiggity, but it is a different example of the same concept. In point in fact, it wouldn't be until a much later Mario game that I would actually feel in control of my character at all times. But we've already covered that, so that's whatever. One of the things that I don't like is how Mario changes how he moves based on how he's been moving. Now, normally that would be a positive thing, but the way they executed it here leads to things like, here, let me use an exact example. Let's say you've got a platform here. Now, how many of you have ever had this example? So you've got Mario here. You're standing right here. You want to jump this way, but you're on this ledge, so you want to kind of go this way a bit, turn around, and then jump this way. This is a terrible explanation, whatever. So you go this way to turn around, and then you go right off the edge. Because one of the things Mario likes to do is he likes to do what I think of mentally as the Red Dead Redemption movement, where the animation is prioritized over the movement and the control thereof. So you hit left, and he goes like this, or you hit right, and he goes like this. Now, sometimes I tap left, and he just turns left. And sometimes I tap right, and he just turns right. Near as I can tell, the only thing that allows that to happen is a total lack of momentum. Or movement, I guess. So in other words, you have to come to a complete dead stop to be able to turn around precisely. And that's nice and all, but there's plenty of platforming challenges in this game which require you to be moving quickly. There's a timer, or there's a spike, or there's a death, or whatever that's in the way. So, not super cool. And that's the only example I'm going to go into, because again, I can't do this game justice. But there's little, tiny details about that make controlling this game frustrating for me. Now, I know I'm not alone in that, but I predict right now that before even listening to the point I'm talking about right now, at least someone's going to jump in the comments and say, Laurie, you're an idiot, you just suck at the controls. I probably do suck at the controls. I'm willing to admit that. But if the only defense that can be leveled is get used to it, I feel like we have a core flaw here. Now, again, this is understandable. They were figuring all this stuff out for the first time. Like I said earlier, it's the same thing with the camera. The camera that controls both sit on that same problem. And it's worth noting that while Mario himself controls kind of badly, his movement is excellent. Now, I know that sounds like a contradiction, but what I mean by that is, remember how I mentioned earlier you can always tell the things that the developer really put time and attention into? Think about Mario's kit in this game. Now, usual Mario games, they give you kit in the form of power-ups. We've got the flower, we've got the tail, we've got the cape, which is overpowered. We've got all kinds of cool stuff, right? What are our power-ups in this game? There are 3. The flight cap, which is a poor man's version of the cape and is kind of The metal cap, which is cool but barely ever used. And the vanishing cap, which is cool but barely ever used. So that's effectively 1 2/3 of a power-up within this game. No, the kit is entirely in how you move through the game. We've got the crawl, we've got the walk, we've got the run, we've got the lunge forward, we've got the slide kick, we've got the lower kick, we've got the punch, we've got the jump, we've got the double jump, we've got the triple jump, we've got the somersault jump, we've got the backward flip, we've got the wall kick. I feel like I'm still missing some. There's the lunge in the air. That's an important one. This game, I think that might be all of them. Oh, we've got the ground pound. Sorry, that's a recurring one. Some of these are recurring, obviously. But you understand my point. A huge amount of effort was put into making sure that the way you move through the world was very designed. I feel like if those little niggling details with the controls and the camera were not there, I would love playing this game, and I know that because I love Mario Odyssey. Having the moves be the kit is awesome. It's a nice variance for Mario in general, and I really do praise the team for how much thought and effort they put into it, especially since so much of it sits on just 2 controls. 3, technically. The analog stick to move, the Z trigger to trigger most things, and the jump. And the exact nature of what you're doing informs how you do it. It's all shortcutted, and I like shortcutting when it comes to controller design in general. Excellent stuff pretty much across the board. So, then we've got some cool levels. I mentioned some cool levels. We've got Tiny Huge, we've got Lava Land, Lethal Lava Land, excuse me. Then we've got the Clock Tower. How many of you remember the Clock Tower? How many of you like or dislike the Clock Tower? Have an opinion on it, basically. It's probably at least some of you. When I was replaying this on the DS for the first... I'm saying that wrong. When I was playing through the DS version for the first time, I got to the Clock Tower and my reaction was, okay. And then I played through it and I liked it. That's weird. I remember hating this stage. And I'm not sure why exactly. The Clock Tower is legit. I had the same general experience this time around. I enjoyed the Clock Tower. It's exactly what a final stage, or close to final stage, should be in a Mario game. There's lots of interesting platforming, and tight timing, and good enemy placement, and all the usual stuff that goes into this. It is, in fact, in my opinion, one of the only stages that's designed around 3D platforming. Now, if that sounds weird, most of the stages in this game aren't designed around platforming at all. Remember Lethal Lava Land? That's a flat plane. There's not a lot of platforming. There's not a lot of jumping or tricks or anything like that. It's just moving through it, right? Which goes back to that moveset thing I talked about. Now, there are some exceptions to that, including Bowser 1, Bowser 2, and Bowser 3. But hang on. Really picture those stages in your mind for a second. Ignore the red coins for a moment. So what's Bowser 1? Well, we go right, and then we go left, and then we go right. We go off on the Z-axis for a second. Then we go right, left, and right. it's a 2D stage, played in a 3-dimension, obviously, but you could see what I mean by that. Several stages in this game were clearly designed from the 2D mindset. And this makes sense. These people have been making 2D platformers for, at this point, about a decade and a half, depending on how you define that. So it makes sense. But it's interesting because all the Bowser stages do that. The lava one, sky, all of them are 2D back and forth. What's weird is I think it's some of the better platforming in the game, but I think that's partially because it's some of the only platforming in the game. It's one of the reasons why the clock tower sticks out in my mind even more, because again, there's actual 3D platforming going on. Then there's the damned Air Rainbow Cruise plans, blah, 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 blah. Now, I thought I just liked Hazy Maze, and I did. I thought I just liked the Shifting Sands, and I did. But I didn't know how bad some of this game could get until I got to that stage. Let's go through this for a moment, shall we? First of all, the stink of we ran out of time is all over the place. Remember how I mentioned, comparing and contrasting directly? Look at any of the good stages in this game. Let's go with Bob-omb Battlefield, because we know they put a lot of thought and effort into that. And put that immediately alongside Rainbow Cruise, or Rainbow Ride, whatever the hell it's called. I think it's Rainbow Ride. Put it immediately alongside Rainbow Ride. Rainbow Ride it does almost everything wrong. First of all, it doesn't have a lot of platforming in general. What little it does is 2D platforming, as we've already discussed. It relies on it's large swaths of effectively empty terrain with a boring skybox and boring textures. They're just random geometric shapes in the sky with no real thought or effort put into them other than the fact that they are in your way. Okay, that's bad. The nature of how it's navigated means that there's no real navigation to it. Because of the fact that it's in the sky and you don't have a cap, there's no going from point A to point B. There's only following on the rails that are there as part of the aforementioned platforming. So there's no navigating the stage other than by virtue of going through one path and then either reversing through it or jumping down in order to start over again to go down another path, of which there are 4, by the way. There's the one this way, the one this way, the one this way, and the one this way. And that's it. Those are the 4 paths, the 4 spokes or teens or whatever you want to call that of tines of the stage. So, okay, that sucks. Then there's the obvious thing. Virtually any mistake, death. Now, you might think, yeah, Laura, it's a hard stage. But what I mean by that is you can have difficulty without being punishing. We've talked about this so many times. We've actually talked about this in Mario World recently. A game that is properly difficult but doesn't punish you that much for failure, in other words, lets you get right back into it, is something that I've been getting more and more in favor of in recent years in my life as I discuss and analyze level design. The example of this is, and probably always will be, Celeste, which is an extremely difficult game, very unpunishing. Oh, you died, you're back at the beginning of there, boom, done. Try it again. That's exactly what I'm talking about. In games like these, that usually boils down to recovery mechanics. Let's go back to the clock level, tick-tock clock. If you fall, you actually have a reasonably good chance of recovering. There's usually platforms under you, and if there aren't, there's usually platforms under those. There is a bottomless pit, I'm not going to lie about that. But you still have that chance to try and hit something on the way down. Lethal Lava Land, the recovery mechanics, right? It's Boo's Mansion, there's all sorts of recovery in there. I shouldn't even mention that. There's no instant death in Boo's Mansion. In the sky, it is possible to recover. I've done it on camera. But generally speaking, if you make a mistake, you're dead. The end. Hang on. It gets worse. Because the worst thing about this level is the damn carpet. You get on the carpet, it slowly moves through the level. If you're off it for too long, it goes away. And depending on where you are, you're dead. You're not dead right now, but you can't go anywhere other than jump to your death. So have fun. So that sucks. But the really aggravating part is it's so slow and so punishing. Which means not only is even more of your time being wasted every mistake, but it's really easy to make a mistake, especially on repeat tries. I actually have a term for this exact same concept. I call this factory worker syndrome. This refers to any element of game design where you have to do a boring, monotonous task that is very punishing and very easy to screw up for a long stretch of time. Let's see why it gets the name. This is this stage in a nutshell. It does almost everything wrong. It's not interesting visually, it's not interesting in terms of platforming, it's not interesting in terms of recovery, it's excessively punishing, and it's boring. But wait, there's one last thing it does wrong, and that's the song. Now, okay, I don't mean the song's bad. Koji Kondo does an amazing job, as he always does. That's not what I'm trying to say. But this is a bad application of this song. You could tell they just smacked whatever song they had onto it, because it doesn't fit the stage at all. This is a fairly slow-paced stage, and I do think that's a bad thing, but they have this really high-paced kind of a song going on for it, which completely contrasts the mood. And it's a pretty short loop for a stage that goes on entirely too long. Everything about Rainbow Ride sucks. And then we get to Bowser in the Sky, which does everything I just mentioned wrong right. That's an awesome level. I'm just... Hell yeah. Again, 2D platforming, but whatever. At least they do some good stuff with it, am I right? And that's Mario 64 in a nutshell, isn't it? It's pretty fun, except when it's really frustrating. They worked on this game for 3 years. Worked on it alongside Ocarina of Time. And I don't know what else to add to that, really. I'm not looking forward to the comments section this time around. I'm going to be completely honest on that one. But it's okay. Tomorrow we're covering a game which is much less contentious. Super Mario Sunshine. I don't really have an opinion walking into that one, so we'll see what we think of that tomorrow.